you. And the slides and the recording will be posted on our Wakefield Good Food Partnership website, and the slides will be sent to you after the webinar. We'll also importantly have an evaluation which will circulate, so please take the time to share your feedback. It's really valuable to us. So now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Laila. She's a registered nutritionist with the Association for Nutrition and the regional lead for Yorkshire and Humber. So over to you, Laila.
Thank you very much, Karen. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this lunchtime. I hope you really find this presentation interesting. And let's get started. Let's talk about ultra-processed foods. What are we really eating? So if we can just move on to the next slide, please. We're going to start, I thought it'd be fun for us to start with a quick poll. So think about your last food shop. What guided your food choices? What was it that made you choose the foods that you were buying? If you could just follow the instructions on the screen, if you could type in menti.com either on your phone or on your computer and enter this code that's on the screen, 43534310, and answer the question. Don't worry, it's anonymous and you can put in up to 3 responses each. And I'd recommend not closing that app or the window because another question later. So let's give you a couple of minutes to put in your answers, and it'll be interesting to see what you have to say. Shall I take control and move over so we could see what people's answers are? I'll do that. So we're getting some different answers there. At the moment, price, health, taste, and cost are the standout reasons. Personal preferences is up there. Regular family meals. Recommendations, seasonality, use by date. Just give it a few more seconds. So I think that's pretty much where it stands at the moment. So it looks like taste, price, health, and cost are the top 4 that people have chosen. And it's important to think about all of these answers up here on the screen, because behind the scenes, there's a powerful commercial system that shapes what's available to us and what's being promoted and what's profitable. And that's where ultra-processed foods come in. So let's unpack what ultra-processed foods really are and what it means for our health, our choices, and our communities. I'll stop sharing and we'll move back to the slide set. So next slide, please. Thank you very much. So why talk about this? First of all, I'd like to say that we're not here to judge anyone's shopping basket. We're here to understand what's really going on with our food. Most of us, we want to eat well. We want food that helps us to feel good and stay healthy and support our family's health. But the reality is that many of the products that we're surrounded by are designed to look healthy while being anything but. And it's confusing. You know, a lot of people don't know what is ultra-processed food. So hopefully today is about clarity. It's about giving you tools to spot what's really in your food and understand how it's affecting your body. Next slide, please. So ultra-processed foods doesn't mean it's just packaged foods. They're made basically using ingredients you wouldn't use at home. So for example, they would contain ingredients such as modified starch, emulsifiers, artificial flavorings, even the more traditional foods such as cured meats. They aren't just made with salt these days. They're often packed with preservatives and stabilizers. or those healthy products such as protein bars or low-fat yogurts. Those can be ultra-processed. Generally, if it's made in a factory and it has a long shelf life, it's probably ultra-processed. So one thing you could maybe do when you go back home this evening or this weekend is think about your last food shop or look at the things you've recently purchased. How many items had ingredients that you don't recognize? So I've provided a real life example here on the screen on the right hand side. This is Flora Plant Double Cream. It's sold as a plant-based alternative to dairy cream, which sounds healthy. But if you look at the ingredients, you'll see modified starch, there's multiple emulsifiers, stabilizers in there, and flavorings. These are things we just don't cook with at home, and that's a clear sign of ultra processing. Next slide, please. So let's pause here. Processing, the word processing is not automatically a bad thing. So processed foods are not automatically a bad thing. Washing spinach and freezing peas, for example, is a form of food processing. Even making olive oil is a form of food processing. What really matters is the type and extent of processing. And when it comes to ultra-processed foods, there's no single definition. So if you just press the slide again, please. So on the right-hand side of the screen, if you press again, is the NOVA classification system. It's the most broadly used food processing classification in the system. So at the moment, there's no single agreed definition, but this is the most common one. So it doesn't look at the nutrition of in a food. It helps us understand the degree to which a food has been processed. So what gets added along the way. I've highlighted in the red box NOVA 4. Those are the ones we want to watch. Those are the ones that are ultra processed foods and drinks. These are the foods that are engineered to be super tasty, quite hard to resist. They tend to be long lasting. They tend to be convenient. And for all of these reasons, this tends to push out healthier options. So instead of asking, is this food processed? It might be more helpful to ask yourself, how processed is it? And what's being added that I wouldn't use in my own kitchen? That's the clue. Next slide, please. So there's a real mismatch at the moment between intention and reality. People want to eat well, but many products, they look healthy, they're labeled as natural, they're labeled as high protein, and there's no added sugar, but they're still classified as ultra processed. But it's really difficult to identify. So an app called LifeSum earlier this year did a survey on 5,000 adults. 68% of those people who responded believe that ultra-processed foods are harmful. But of those 68, those people found them really hard to identify as well. The scary thing here is that new research shows that ultra-processed foods disrupt those gut-brain signals. So it makes harder for us to recognize when we're full. It makes it harder to resist cravings. And it also makes it more challenging to be in tune with what our bodies actually need. For children, the impact is even starker. So regularly eating ultra-processed foods, which are quite often soft, easy to eat, a similar texture, so they have this uniform food texture, it might limit their ability to learn how different foods feel and taste and move in their mouths. So this can impact things like chewing skills and speech development, but also their confidence in exploring different tastes and textures. So they might be less willing to try different foods as they grow. And obviously this would impact their long-term health. In the UK, ultra-processed foods make up around 57% of our daily energy intake, our daily calories. This is second highest globally to that of the United States. And it's not surprising. These foods are designed to be convenient. They've been designed to be addictive in the sense that we want them, and they're very hard to resist, especially if life is very busy or you're feeling overwhelmed. So I have a video I'd like to share with you. I will share this myself in a little while. I hope you can hear it. First of all, I have to warn you, he does have a strong accent, but I love him because many of this man's posts highlight what's being done to the food we eat. I have experimented with a few people. Some people can hear the video, some people can't, but there is text underneath. There are also links to this video that you can watch in your own time, but let's see how it goes. I'll share the video now and hopefully you can hear it. Right, let's give it a go. So I hope you could hear that, and it'd be interesting to hear what your thoughts are on that. I find it eye-opening. And like I said, if you couldn't hear it or if you'd like to view it again, links to that video, and he does several of these kinds of videos, are available. If we could move on to the next slide, please. So these are common ultra-processed foods that are in our diet. So carbonated soft drinks and energy drinks, there's confectionery, biscuits, pastries, packaged snacks. I did forget to add industrialized bread to this list, so bread would be there too. Sweetened breakfast cereals and flavored yogurts. Sorry, just preparing for the next slide. Pre-prepared meats, cheese, pasta, and pizza. Things like sausages, burgers, hot dogs, and powdered packaged instant soups and noodles. So if you could go back to your Mentimeter, please. If you've closed the window or the app, the instructions are there on the screen. So from this list of foods in front of you, type in the 3 that you think you buy the most often. Don't worry, I'm not judging you, and it's completely anonymous. It's just interesting to see what you've chosen. Remember, I have also forgotten to add industrialized bread, so feel free to add that too if that's something you buy. We'll leave the screen for a little while just as people put in their answers, and then I'll take control. You can see what people are writing. Just give it a few more minutes or seconds while people are putting things in.
Laila, can I just ask? So it still says you've already responded to this question on mine. How do you move it?
Okay, it might have been that you had already responded to that question beforehand. So we'll
just refresh it, do you think?
Yeah, I'll share the screen.
Refresh if it's still on the previous one, yeah.
Okay. I'll just share the screen now because it looks like responses are slowing down. Bear with me. So hopefully you can see the screen. People are still putting their answers, but you can see Common ones on there are biscuits, bread, soft drinks, pre-prepared meat, chocolate, hot dogs. There's some breaded products there in different forms I can see as well. Sausages, just about all of them. Fair enough, yes. Crumpets, so those baked goods. That's brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing. Again, like I said, this is not coming from a place of judgment. It's just interesting to see. I guess it's quite shocking, isn't it, when we look at the range of these ultra processed foods and how much they feature as part of our everyday lives. But yeah, thank you for sharing your responses. I'll stop sharing that screen now and we'll move back to the presentation, please. Thank you. So next slide, please. So I think our answers quite sort of reflected what we see on this slide. These are the UK's most commonly eaten ultra processed foods. So you can see that the top one is industrialized bread. And by industrialized bread, I mean it's a highly mechanized process where additives are added to the bread so that it rises a lot faster than it would when you bake bread at home, but also gives that uniformity so that all our bread looks the same. So, you know, if you're buying from one brand, you can expect the same taste, look, smell, shape from that brand. Following that is pre-packaged meats and then breakfast cereals. But actually, a lot of the ones that follow are quite similar in the amounts. Things like meat products, confectionery, biscuits, pastries, cakes, they're all relatively close. So I just thought it'd be interesting to compare what we all said, which was mainly bread, cheese, biscuits, sausages, to this list here. Next slide, please. Right. And then on this slide, there was a study done. So the two charts show the types of ultra-processed foods most commonly eaten by men and women. For both the groups, the biggest share comes from bread and breakfast foods, things like cereal. And next are fats and sauces including things like ready-bought salad dressings. After that, there's a few differences. So men tend to consume more meat-based ready meals and savory snacks like crisps, whereas women are more likely to consume sweet snacks and desserts and sugary or diet drinks. So quite interesting to also see the gender differences there in our food choices and ultra-processed foods. Next slide, please. Right, so ultra-processed foods, we eat them, they feature widely in our diets, and they don't just affect things like weight. They might increase the risk of serious illnesses like bowel cancer, heart disease, and type 2 diabetes. Why? This is because many ultra-processed foods are low in fiber and nutrients, they're high in additives and refined ingredients, just like the kinds of ingredients we saw in that video that I shared with you a few moments ago. These can really disrupt our gut health, our blood sugar balance, and cause inflammation. So inflammation is the body's way of fighting back when something's wrong, like an injury or an irritant or an infection. Short term, that's a good thing. But if it goes on for too long, it can start to cause damage to healthy tissues instead of fixing them, which then raises the risk of these chronic diseases. A recent article in The Guardian warns that colon cancer in particular is rising sharply in younger people and that ultra-processed foods might be part of the reason. So ultra-processed foods, as I said, they can cause that damage to gut health because there's not enough fiber and they cause inflammation. Younger people, especially teenagers, eat a lot more ultra-processed foods. It makes up around 65% of their diets. So they're exposed from a young age longer and eating more of these foods, which is harmful to their health. I think the more worrying thing as well is that some experts warn of the long-term impacts of ultra-processed foods, that this could rival other public health risks like smoking. So if we think about these multiple chronic diseases such as cancer, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and then multiply it by the millions of people that consume these products across the world, and then that long-term impact, how it's not only widespread, but it's the long-term impact could be as bad as smoking. Next slide, please. So not all calories are equal. Let's look at the images side by side. Both of these options are 500 calories. So one's a Frappuccino, one's a cottage pie. The Frappuccino, it's sweet, it's creamy, and it's designed to reward your brain. Well, it's designed to hit your brain's reward system. It's also low in fiber and protein, so it doesn't keep you full. You drink it fast, and your body doesn't get what it needs. The cottage pie, on the other hand, it contains minced meat, peas, mashed potatoes, so it'll give you protein, fiber, and some vitamins. These are foods that your body can actually use. As I said earlier, ultra-processed foods, such as this Frappuccino, they're engineered to be hyper-palatable. That word means that they're basically made to be irresistible, very, very tasty in ways that hijack our brain's reward system. So they're much more appealing than natural food, and it's harder to stop them even when you're full. So we're quite often people are very judgmental. They can be quite judgmental of people who carry a bit of extra weight, but we say they eat too much, but it's first of all a lot more calories. You're drinking the calories in this example, but those calories don't give you the nutrients you need. So you can still carry extra weight and be undernourished. So it's not about calories, it's about what those calories contain. And as I said earlier, in the UK, over half of our calories, around 57%, now come from ultra-processed foods. Next slide, please. So when I ask who is shaping our choices, who is really feeding us? We're not just talking about ingredients, we're talking about influence, and that influence on our health and our habits and our food systems. So this image shows the 10 corporations that control the majority of the globe's food and beverage brands. Together, they fill what we see in our shelves, our plates, and in our children's lunchboxes. So they might give the illusion of diversity because there's so many different brand names up here, but it's really not about choice. It's about power and profit and that illusion of diversity. Next slide, please. So a lot of what these unhealthy industries such as those that manufacture ultra-processed foods, tobacco, and alcohol, they have tactics that are in common with one another. So first of all, they tend to target those who are most vulnerable. This could be people who are under stress, they might be short on time, living in tough circumstances. Those are the people who are more likely to buy these kinds of products because they're cheap, they're everywhere, and they're very aggressively advertised. Another tactic is they tend to shift the blame. So instead of changing their products, we're told to burn off the calories or drink responsibly. So the onus is very much put on us and not on them. They tend to flood deprived areas with advertising. So fast food, alcohol, and vaping, these things are generally pushed hardest in places where people are already struggling. And, they fight back when challenged. So KFC legally threatened Wakefield Council's public health team when they tried to stop a new takeaway opening near schools. And that's how hard these companies basically work to protect their profits, even at the cost of our children's health. And I sound harsh, but they pretend to care. So, for example, Kellogg's runs breakfast clubs, but still sells its ultra-processed cereals loaded with sugar. So the term corporate social responsibility, it makes them look like they care, but often it's more about self-promotion and reputation management, not real change. Next slide, please. So the commercial determinants of health. This is the business that lies behind our diets. And our health can't be separated from those commercial industries. So the food, we know it's profitable. It's made with cheap ingredients. It has a long shelf life. It's engineered for addiction. Manufacturers go as far as using MRI scans and other brain imaging tools to design foods that reward or activate our reward centers and make it hard to stop eating, even when we've eaten quite a lot. And as you know, they heavily market towards children, low income groups, and people living in high stress situations. These corporations, they're very powerful, and they can influence the decisions made when it comes to funding research, and as well as lobbying governments across the world to protect their profits. And health, in this case, always takes a backseat to profit. If you could click down again, please. So you might recognize this guy on the left. This is Dr. Chris Van Tulken, who has been on TV talking about the impact of ultra-processed foods. The image on the right shows what happened to Dr. Chris Van Tulken's brain after just 1 month on a diet high in ultra-processed foods. So on the left, you can see a circular map of his brain connections. The red lines show the new pathways that were formed during the experiment, especially in areas linked to reward and automatic behavior or habit. On the right-hand side of the screen is a 3D brain scan, and this highlights those changes visually. So the front of the brain is where we make decisions and weigh up consequences, whereas the back, that is what handles the habits and automatic responses that we make. So what's quite shocking here is that he followed this high ultra-processed food diet for 1 month, but look how quickly the brain adapted to this diet. So these foods didn't just change his body. From memory, he had gained weight and he didn't feel very, very well. These foods actually rewired his brain. And this is what food manufacturers target when they engineer these ultra-processed foods that we buy. They're not just feeding us, they're actually shaping our behavior. Next slide, please. So I just want to move on to think about, our environments around us. And I think I'd be safe in saying that most of us would recognize these kinds of streets and these types of adverts that we're generally bombarded with most days. Next slide, please. So this is another example of the bigger picture. In April 2025, Bite Back, which is a youth activist movement here in the UK, they launched their hashtag commercial break campaign. This is a bold youth-led effort to give children a break from junk food advertising. They actually bought billboard space and put on this message which says, young activists bought this ad space so junk food giants couldn't. Despite meeting all the advertising standards, 2 of the UK's biggest outdoor media companies pulled that campaign. So this censorship shows how powerful the food industry's influence is. It's not just about what we're eating, it's about who controls that narrative. And I do realize this all can feel quite hopeless, but I promise we are going to come to things that we can do. It's not all negative. Next slide, please. So this is where the tide hopefully begins to turn. The NHS 10-year plan was launched in July this year, and it's part of a major shift in how the NHS is approaching health over the next decade. So instead of just treating illness, the plan is much more focused on trying to prevent it, especially conditions such as type 2 diabetes, obesity, and heart disease, which are often linked to the foods that we eat. It's also about supporting communities, not just hospitals, making sure people have access to good food, clearer information, and environments that make healthy choices easier to make. This does include changing the food environment. So not just telling individuals to eat better, but making sure that the system supports them by setting healthy food sales targets for retailers, updating school meal standards, restricting junk food advertising. I believe that came into place in October 2025. So junk food shouldn't really be advertised until after 9 p.m. and making nutritious options more visible and affordable in everyday spaces. So it's about shifting that burden from the individual to the system around them. So that healthier choices, they're not just available, they're more normalized, they're supported and easier to make. It shows that change is possible and that health isn't just about willpower, it's about what's around us. But while I'm here, I just want to talk about food justice and why affordability matters. So I do want to acknowledge the fact that while we talk about food choices, we have to remember that for many families here in Wakefield, it's not about preference or willpower, it's about poverty. So while the NHS plan is starting to shift the system with better school meals and healthier retail targets and ad restrictions, we do need to go further and help people afford those foods that are healthier for us. Next slide, please. So, there are things we can do from us as individuals up to as a society. We all have a role to play. So where possible, cook more from scratch and share your food skills if you have them. Learn to spot ultra-processed foods and reduce that reliance. And I'll be talking a little bit more of that on the next slide as a reminder. Recognize media's influence. So not every chocolate is good for you headline is neutral. When you see those kinds of headlines, ask yourself, who's funded that study? How many people took part in that research? Was it actually research done on an actual chocolate bar, people eating a chocolate bar, or were they eating the cocoa flavanol, which is a type of antioxidant, and did that improve their health? So we have to kind of watch out for some of these headlines. And you could look up growing movements such as Ad-Free Cities, which calls for healthier, more ethical public spaces. So if that resonates, you can join or explore their resources as well. As communities, we could try and support local food producers more, campaign for healthier school meals and food education. There's definitely room for improvement in those areas. And make good food visible and normal in everyday culture. And here I just want to share one of my personal experiences, which is my son, when he was in primary school, he loved to take a salad into school, especially during the hotter months. And his friends would make fun of that. So normal, healthy food like salad was seen as strange and something that was repellent. Thankfully, some of his friends did try his salads over a few weeks, and I did get contacted by a few of the mothers for the vinaigrette recipe that I make at home. So I guess, we did see some change in his friends around him and what some of the foods that they consumed. And so it would be really nice to normalize healthy food in our culture. As a society, we need to keep pushing for that policy change on food marketing, pricing, and access to those foods. And we need to hold these businesses, these large corporations, accountable on how they shape our choices. So quite often they fund the research that support their products, and those studies are the ones that get amplified in the media. And that is why we also need to see more independent science with clear labeling on our food and policies that protect our public health. It's been done before with tobacco. Tactics were exposed, culture was shifted, and the law changed. So hopefully we can do it again with ultra-processed foods. Next slide, please. So there's one more slide after this, but this is one of the last slides I wanted to leave you with, which is the label literacy tips when it comes to ultra-processed foods. So if you have time, scan the ingredients list. So if it has a long list with unfamiliar names, that could often mean that it's ultra-processed food. Watch for those additives, things like emulsifiers, stabilizers, artificial flavors, and colors. These are key ultra-processed food clues. Ignore phrases like natural, high protein, or no added sugar. These can distract you from what's really inside that food. Check for real food. Do you recognize the ingredients? Are these ingredients that you would use at home? Look for fiber and protein. These are the things that help you feel full and support your gut health. And if sugar, oil, or additives are in the top 3 ingredients of the food ingredients list, which is often found on the side or the back of the packaging, it's probably ultra-processed. And finally, my final slide, please, if you could move on. Thank you. The real impact of real food. So ultra-processed foods, they are designed, as I said, to be convenient. That's why so many of us buy them. But they often contain additives that confuse our hunger signals and make it harder to stop eating. So whole and minimally processed foods. So when you get these slides, go back to the Nova that I shared near the beginning. Those are the ones where it's the whole food or very minimally processed things like extra virgin olive oil, packaged salads. Those help us to feel full, satisfied, and better nourished. I guess one of the things I would say here is think of your food, the closer it resembles how it looks on the field or on the farm, the better it probably will be for you. It's not about cutting everything out. It's about taking the time where possible to read your labels, notice what's in your basket, and make small swaps that support your health. So, for example, choosing plain oats over flavored cereal, plain yogurt, adding your own fruit instead of having flavored yogurt, for example, or just cooking with some mince and veg instead of buying a ready meal. These small changes can add up to improving your health. There's a couple of resources I've mentioned on there that could be helpful. There's foodforlife.org.uk. And on there, the link is on the final slide. There's nutrition guidance and recipes. There's also the nhs.uk website, and I've done a link to healthier food swaps. So do feel free to look up those resources in your own time. If you scroll down to the final slide, please, that's where you can see all the resources that I've referred to during this presentation. I hope that's been insightful, and we're open to questions.
Thank you so much, Laila. I did find that very interesting and really well presented. Thank you so much. So, Sue, I think we might have a few questions in the chat.
Right, I've got only 2 questions actually so far. One is that are all UPFs addictive? So things like dairy-free milks, vegan spreads, etc. Are they bad for you or do they pass muster, please?
So not all ultra-processed foods are bad for you. It's the ones that tend to have the flavorings and the sugar that tend to be more addictive because of the taste. But again, I would recommend looking at the the Nova, just to get an understanding of the level of processing. But generally, I would say, if instead of, for example, buying white pasta, buy whole grain pasta. It's just that one bit closer to how food resembles on the field. We've got the extra fiber there from the whole grains, for example. So I would say minimize. You don't want to have a lot of ultra processed foods in your diet, but things like whole grain bread, I wouldn't hold that against anyone, but maybe take some time to look at the labels. It's quite interesting. I took some time recently to look at different wraps on the supermarket shelves, and some have very few ingredients, still ultra processed, but very, very few, whereas others had quite a long list, including emulsifiers and stabilizers. So just taking the time, I guess, to look at those ingredients and choosing the best option you can afford.
Just as an aside to that, I was told by somebody who's really into food and nutrition and fitness about the Yuka food app, which I've put in the chats. And that's an app that you just scan the food that you're intending to buy, and it tells you whether it's a plus or a tick or a cross sort of thing.
Yeah.
And some of them are very surprising. They're not what you expect they're going to be.
Yeah, that's right. It's a free app, so anyone can download that. I think if you pay, you get a little bit more, but I've only tried the free version. But it is quite insightful. It's a good thing to use. But
sometimes it's reassuring because you choose something because you think it's good, and then it actually says, "Yeah, you've got the right one there."
Yes, absolutely. And there is another app, which maybe Karen, you can remember. It's the one where you can scan foods to see how much sugar is in there. I can't remember off the top of my head, but my children in particular liked using that when they were young. It's an NHS app, I think.
That's right. It's the food scanner app. I think they've just changed the name to make it completely simple and just call it the food scanner app. So yeah, when you scan barcodes, and there's many foods in their data bank which are across all the common supermarkets, and then it's quite rewarding for children because it'll give them an idea of the very pictorially the fat, the sugar, the salt, and then if they make a better choice, it suggests swaps on there, and if they make a good choice, they like get a little person dancing and celebratory balloons and things like that. So it's a really lovely visual tool for children.
Definitely. And I'd like to just add to that to say that if you have teenagers or even as adults, it might be worthwhile trying to see if you can see, look up Chris Van Tulken and his series on ultra processed foods, because I actually sat down with my teens to watch it when it came out, and they immediately went to the kitchen to look at a lot of the ingredients that we had in our cupboards. So it's a very good way of involving the family if you want to all sit down and educate yourselves around the food that you're eating. I definitely recommend looking that one up.
Great. 2 more questions. Somebody is trying to eat more plant-based foods. So are plant-based foods like corn classed as ultra-processed, please?
So corn is classed as ultra-processed, but I would say it's one of those that isn't it's not bad for you in comparison to perhaps Haribo sweets or the other brands are available. But in comparison to sweets out there, I think some people have to turn to these foods because they're affordable, they're easy, they're convenient. So I would weigh things up. I would certainly, you could have your corn, but make sure you also have plenty of the more natural, I suppose, vegetables and fruit that are out there, to create a more balanced plate that isn't ultra processed food heavy.
I think
you need. And Laila, could I add to
Please
that?
Do, yes.
Obviously, within the corn range, you've got the basic products, which would be more like the pieces, the mince,
yes.
And then you've got the ones that they offer you that are crumb coated, that are made into pies and sausage rolls. So that obviously they have a huge range from relatively low processing to highly processed as well. So it's checking the packaging. And
Definitely.
many other sources of protein within the plant-based foods, which are more natural, are available too.
Yes.
Right, another question. Cheese was mentioned in your talk. Would blocks of cheese be minimally processed rather than ultra?
So the cheese is a tough one because some cheeses are traditionally made and they're not classed as ultra processed. They're just processed, and they're absolutely fine. Things like I guess the more traditionally made cheddars, the more feta cheeses. It's more the kinds of cheeses such as the stringy ones that children like, the rubbery kinds of cheeses that we sometimes see, the pre-sliced ones that might be quite rubbery or floppy. Those are more the less traditional cheeses that are ultra processed. So I'd say good quality block cheese is processed but not ultra processed. So it can be confusing. I do acknowledge that.
Yeah. Right, last question that's come up in the chat is, what can we do when governments make legal requirements such as folic acid in flour, which makes products like Jason's sourdough more processed?
What we can do is so that folic acid it's being added to all white bread. So I would simply swap to, and I would anyway, a whole grain Jason's sourdough bread. It's the white bread that they're adding all this folic acid to, if that's something that you want to avoid. So go for the whole grain option instead.
That's worth knowing. Yeah, thank you. And somebody's just put slow risen bread with 4 ingredients is better than factory bread. So make your own, really. Flour, water, salt, and yeast.
That's right. I mean, I love homemade bread, but not all of us have time to make it. And we have to acknowledge some people live really busy, stressful lives, and they can only make the best choices available. But yes, I love homemade bread. Can't beat it.
That's all the questions that have come up in the chat. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything else now.
There was a question from Mick from Gateshead Food Partnership, Laila, asking if he could have your contact so that he could possibly book you later for a similar webinar.
Yes, I'd love to, Mick. If maybe you contact the organisers, and I'm happy for you to have my email address. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Mandy's put ultra processed foods all have cancer causing ingredients in, and we need to stick to organic foods.
Again, I mean, organic is the epitome, but they can be very expensive. So it's what people can afford. If you can grow your own, fantastic. If you have access to the land to grow your own, or the purchasing power to buy organic. But there is also another useful tool. I'll see if I can somehow share that with yourselves. There's something called the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15, and there is a UK version. So they publish this list every year as to which foods have the most pesticides in and which don't. So if you want to make a more informed choice, you can look at that list. But I'll have to look that one up for you and share it if possible.
I've got a quick question that I've just thought of, and it's how could we make the food that invariably ends up in places like food banks and food pantries healthier? Because if you're leaving the supermarket, you see the big container that's out there for donations, and it's invariably got the cheapest of the cheap things,
Yeah.
which is wonderful that people are giving it, but they're not healthy. But also so many of it's by necessity, tins, packets, there's no fresh food there.
No. I from what I've seen, there are fresh foods also available at food banks, but it's so difficult, isn't it, for people who are living in really difficult circumstances. They might not have even the ability to cook their food. It might be too expensive to cook their food, to have a hot meal. So I feel like that's a whole new webinar. But I guess where we can, maybe choosing something ever so, slightly better that we can donate to people, if that is something we're doing at the supermarket. But certainly tinned foods, they're not necessarily a bad thing. I feel like Karen might want to join in here. I could see you nodding, Karen. But yeah, I don't think tinned foods are the enemy here.
Definitely, they can contribute to our fruit and veg intake, our soluble fibre, so they can be a really good source, practical, cheaper, and something we can readily donate. I think sometimes the food banks go, please don't give any more pasta or baked beans.
Yes.
There's only so much of those people can eat. So sometimes perhaps we need more guidance as to what are the things that we'd like donated to those food banks. As you say, it's wonderful that people are prepared to donate.
We've just had a response in that a couple of food banks use monetary donations to purchase fresh, healthy food to go alongside the package donations provided. And they try to stick to the Eat Well guide as best they can. And Mick said frozen is good too. I suppose the beauty of tinned food is that generally, if you haven't got heating or cooking facilities, the vegetables are already cooked. So if necessary, you could eat it cold. I mean,
Yeah.
it probably might not taste as well as if it was hot, but if push comes to shove, at least you'll be getting some nutrition.
Yeah. It's hard. It's nice to hear of those food banks that do buy fresh foods as well, and that they try to adhere as well as they can to the guidance. But yes, I'd love to see more guidance with regards to what we can donate. It would be nice to have that information out there for people, so we can help others who are less fortunate than ourselves be a little bit have a healthier diet. Yeah.
But I wouldn't like to give the impression that all tin food is a bad thing. That certainly it's not. And as Mick said, maybe not in relation to food banks, but frozen food, frozen fruits and vegetables particularly, are excellent in the level of nutrition that they contain.
And more affordable oftentimes as well.
Frozen is usually the cheapest now, and also at least less food wastage, which, because you can just take as much as you want, added advantage for people who are very busy. They're usually prepped for you as well.
And Mick's just put that in Middlesbrough, the food partnership cooking with microwave, which most folks have.
Yeah.
So
right.
I suppose that's, if you've got what we would have called a bedsit, you might have a microwave and a kettle. So yeah, I suppose
and
you can wean people off ready meals, which are often UPFs.
Yeah. You can even they have, so I'm thinking about young people as well who maybe are moving out of the home and that's all they have access to is a microwave. There are some decent cookbooks now that show you how to cook with a microwave as well. So that might be something worth arming our young people with so that they stay away from these ready meals and eat more from as much as fresh as possible.
A great point, Laila. So I'm conscious that we're nearly finished with our webinar. So thank you ever so much for everybody who's contributed and attended. It's great to have you here today. Thank you very much to Laila for our lovely presentation. We hope you found the webinar both interesting and useful. Please remember to fill in the evaluation. Feel free to share the recordings with colleagues and friends and slides that you know. So that's the end of the webinar. Goodbye from the Wakefield